So, the Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. That's the Sea of Galilee. And he revealed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And they said, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. As dawn was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not know it was Jesus. And he said to them, "Lads, you haven't caught anything, have you?" And they answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and the number of the fish was so great that they were not able to haul it in. Then, when that disciple whom Jesus loved exclaimed to Peter, "It is the Lord." And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he had stripped down to fish, and he jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in by boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, only about 100 yards off. When they landed, they saw a charcoal fire with fish and bread on it. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." So Simon Peter went and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Not one of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew that it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus had appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Then feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then tend my sheep." And he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter felt hurt because he had said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Then feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were young, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around your waist and take you to where you do not go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And after this, he said to him, "Follow me." Pray with me. Oh God, we, like Peter, have denied you more than once, regret it, and worry that our failures will cause you to abandon us. May this story of how Jesus responded to Peter's denials show us the truth about your love for us. Our gospel story today begins with three words: after these things. And to understand today's story, we need to understand what these things referred to. Well, the first thing they referred to was in the Last Supper, when Jesus told his disciples, "This very night, all of you will fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." And Peter said, if all fall away, I never will. And Jesus said, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me. And Peter said, I will never disown you, even if I have to die with you. And all of the other disciples said the same thing. That was the first thing. Now, the second thing these things referred to was after Jesus was arrested. He was at the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, warming him, and Peter was outside warming himself by a charcoal fire. 3 different people accused Peter of being one of Jesus' disciples. And 3 different times, Peter denied it. The last time, he denied it with a curse and an oath. And the rooster crowed. And in Luke's gospel, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. And Peter saw his look and remembered that Jesus had predicted that he would deny him. And he went out and wept bitterly. That's the backstory for today. Now our story. So in our story, in our gospel reading, 7 of the disciples had gone up north, back up to Galilee, where Jesus had told them to go. Can you imagine, though, what they were thinking, what they were feeling? The guilt, the regret they would have felt, especially Peter, at abandoning Jesus, and their fear of encountering him again. But they went back to doing the only thing they knew how to do without Jesus, fishing. And Peter said, I'm going fishing. And the others said, well, we're going with you. And they fished all night. Fishing at night on the Sea of Galilee caught more fish than fishing in the day. And those caught in the night were fresh and could be sold the next morning. But they caught nothing. And in the mist, through the mist and the early light of dawn, over on the shore, they saw a man. And he yelled out to them, you catch anything? And they yelled out, no. And he said, well, throw the net on the other side of the boat and you will. So they did. And they caught more fish than they could haul into the boat. And one of the disciples, probably John, put 2 and 2 together. This figure on the beach that looked vaguely familiar, and this extraordinary catch of fish. And he realized, Peter, it's the Lord. Oh, geez, I bet their stomachs tightened. Well, Peter swam ashore and the others came on in the boat. And it was Jesus cooking fish on a charcoal fire. The only other time in John's gospel that a charcoal fire was mentioned was at Peter's 3 denials. But soon he would be questioned again as to whether or not he was a disciple. Jesus said, come on, let's have breakfast. No one spoke. None of the disciples dared to say, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. And some of them undoubtedly feared what Jesus might say or do because of the way they had betrayed him. But Jesus, in a move that surprised them, he took the bread, broke it, and gave it to each of the disciples. And then he took the fish and gave it to each of the disciples. And some of them undoubtedly thought, this is kind of like the last meal we had with him. But no one spoke. Only the sound of the crackling embers in the fire, the sound of the seagulls circling overhead, hoping for some of the leftovers, the sound of the water slapping against the hull of the boat. After they finished eating, Jesus broke the silence, and he said, Simon, son of John. He called him Simon. He didn't call him Peter, the one on whom the church would be built. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, we don't know what these referred to. Was it the 153 fish? Was it the 6 other disciples that Jesus had spent the last 3 years of his life with? We don't know. Do you love me more than these? And he says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, then feed my lambs. And a bit later, he said to him a second time, Simon, do you love me? And Peter said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And a little bit later, Jesus said a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter felt hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. You can imagine tears in Peter's eyes, his remorse, his regret, his grief at what he had done. And Peter said, then feed my sheep. The surprising thing about that story for me is what Jesus did not say to Peter. It would have been so human, so much like us, to remind Peter of his failures. In the 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Peter said 3 times, I don't know him. He denied even knowing him. And in John's Gospel, he denied that he was a disciple. But Jesus did not want to increase Peter's embarrassment. Everyone there knew what Peter had done. Jesus did not ask him, are you sorry what you did? You confess what you did? Do you promise it'll never happen again? No, none of that. He didn't need to increase Peter's guilt. Peter had a lifetime of guilt already. No, the surprising thing, the astounding thing about this was that Jesus' unconditional love of Peter, his unconditional love of Peter, was unaffected by Peter's denials. And Jesus confirmed his love and his relationship with Peter by telling Peter, just as Jesus had been the shepherd for the sheep while he was there, Jesus wanted Peter to become the sheep after he was gone. He said, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. There was work to do in their new relationship. Now, that story reminds me of a parable. It's the parable of the prodigal son. And you may not see a connection right away, but in the prodigal son, he rejected his relationship with his father. He squandered his inheritance, and he figured out what he would confess when he went back to see his father. But when he returned and the father saw him, the father's love for him had not ended. The father did not say the father didn't say, I forgive you for what you've done. No, he ran to him, he hugged him, and he kissed him. And then he said, put sandals on his feet, a signet ring, the signature of their family, on his finger, and the best robe on him. Now, what would those 3 items signify? They signified that the son was back in relationship with his father, and his father had work for him to do. He was back in the family with those responsibilities. But that was a parable, right? That was a story. But Peter's return to Jesus was a real-life demonstration of the truth that we can do nothing to make God stop loving us. Peter was back in relationship with Jesus, and Jesus had work for him to do, not to earn forgiveness or acceptance, but because he loved Jesus. And this all raises the uncomfortable question. Do you, do you love Jesus? Now, some of us would prefer to answer the question quickly, like Peter did. And we might say, Jesus, remember I told you I loved you when I was confirmed, when I was 12 years old? Others of us would say, Jesus, your question is embarrassing. Would you ask me something like, are we good friends? I can answer that, but I don't like to answer questions that have either or answers. I'm not the kind of Christian that's comfortable talking about loving Jesus. In fact, Jesus, I don't think you've asked me the right question. What difference does it make if I love you or not? Isn't it enough to just care for the sheep? And Jesus says, no, it's not. Because some of the sheep refuse to eat, and some of them bite. And some of the lambs stay lambs for 40 years, and they never become sheep. So if you are caring for sheep for any reason other than because you love me, you will not last long. And so out of concern for you and the sheep, I ask you again, do you love me? I dare to say yes because I need so much help from God's Spirit. I know that if I love Jesus, the way to show it is in how I care for other people. Loving Jesus over the years has been so surprising. The people I got to help, the people that were impossible for me to love. The path he led me on was not where I had planned on going, but turned out to be far better than where I had planned to go. If you take the path of discipleship, you cannot know where that path will lead. You can only know that at the end of it is Jesus, the Christ, just as it was for Peter.